I do this thing that I call having tea, which is I'm having this thought come up, and your brain will naturally do this during sleep, and we call it nightmares. You have this experience night after night after night where your brain brings up this experience, and you need to relive it. And what your brain actually wants to do in that moment is reframe that, find some sort of positive to take away this, extract this really traumatic part of it, and replace it with this really good part or an okay, acceptable part that then allows you to kind of move past it. Your brain naturally wants to have this nightmare and have this kind of like injected memory that will allow it to then pack it away and say, okay, I am now done with that. What I do as a technique is called having tea. If you have something, I'm getting chills because it fucked my brain up really in a good way when I did it. But this is no different than if somebody came to my apartment door right now and went, knock, knock, knock. That's you about to have anxiety and having a panic attack because you're having you have this trigger that goes off. Let's say a male coworker, if you had a male narcissist, is like yelling at you and it triggers you because that's what your narcissist used to do to you. You need to welcome that emotion and experience in as if it was a person at your door. Okay, and say, who are you? What are you? What did I go through? You sit down, you make it tea, and you look at it as this perspective of, as if it's a human being. That one experience and all the emotions attached are a separate human being. You sit down and you say, well, what happened when you were going through that? What did you feel? What was that like? Why do you think that happened? Keep asking the question, why? Why did they do that? Why did you feel that way? What could you have done differently? And that's the nugget that you take away from this experience. You take the what could I have done differently and you say, okay, in the future, this is something I can look out for. But then you go back to having tea with that emotional experience and you say, okay, well, what else? Well, what else? Why? What else? Why? And eventually, you get to a point where you're exhausted. Oh my God, is it exhausting? You might be crying profusely. You might be just so drained and need to sleep afterwards. You might be hungry or thirsty. And then that emotional experience leaves. They go out the door. But keep in mind, that trigger may not be fully gone. They may come knocking at the door, and you're going to open that door. It's the same trigger, and you say, I dealt with you. What are you back for? I dealt with you. But then you say, get in here. Come on. What now? What is it about that event that I did not get to in that last experience? Why? What is it? What do you want this time? And you'll relive a different moment. You'll relive it a different way. Your brain's still recalling it. But now it's if you remember that first instance you had or whatever instance it was, let's say it's the second time they show up. That first instance is now what you're recalling. It's a changed experience, right? And now you're having tea with it and you're saying, okay, well, what happened? Why? What could I have done differently? Oh, what could I do? What could I do in the future when it comes to people? Is that only with toxic people, or is this a broad thing that I can use with everybody? And you have tea with it. Go through the same process. It goes away. Bye. I'm done with you. And it happens again, right? And this keeps happening depending on how deep the trauma is. The more times they'll keep coming knocking, right? And each time, after a while, it's just like exercising and losing weight. After a while, you start thinking, wait a second, I don't feel as triggered anymore. Now I'm a little bit anxious about that. Now when my coworker yells at me, I feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm not triggered. I'm not going out back having a panic attack. Now I can deal with that. Get in here. Come here. There's one more thing. Now you're excited. Now you can sit there and say, hey, what's this last thing that I need to know about this experience? And you have tea with it. And then you let it go. And you're like, that's fine. You want to come back? We'll have tea and I'll learn about you again. But here's the transformative moment. And I hope you get chills when you hear this. But what will happen after X amount of times, again, depending if it's a really deep, really bad trauma, increase the amount of times that memory is going to come a knocking. After a while, you're going to start to say, you'll get 6 months later, 9 months later, 1 year later, and you're going to say, I haven't heard from that memory in a while. It's gone. That I used to be triggered by that, and it's gone. What happened? And it's because you had tea with that memory, that experience, that you did the internal work. They call it, shadow work or stuff like that, where you went inside and you had tea with that feeling and that experience. And you can do this for your inner child too, if you've got a damaged childhood where, you know, and that's whether you're, you know, you've got a mental problem or you're just, you know, neurotypical or whatever, you can go back and have these experiences and have tea with it, and you can reframe it. That's the brain's natural desire. You just need to have the tools to understand it. So I hope that if one of you understand this and you go to do this at one point, please tell me about your experience, tell me about your experience, but share this with your people when you know somebody needs to go and understand that they have to keep revisiting this. It's not going to go away. You can't drink enough. You can't smoke enough. You can't drug enough. You can't, you know, your therapist may not know to pull this shit out. They may not get it. My therapist was not aggressive. He said, I'm very gentle. I'm not going to go in here and drill you constantly because that's not my style. Okay, Stuart, no problem. You understand where this all comes from, and it comes from inside. You're going to have tea with this. And I'm telling you right now, I've been outside of that narcissistic relationship for a year. I still co-parent with her. I would say at this point, my journey is very much so 80%, and it's never done. So this 80% is bullshit. But yeah. I've gotten through a lot of the worst parts. And at this point now, I still to this day have tea with those memories. I will stop and dissociate in the middle of doing something, and I'll freeze, and my brain, you know, my experience leaves my body, and I'm just frozen there doing dishes, frozen, seriously. And I'll go have tea with that experience again. And it may come back. This is the messed up thing. Is I'm only a year out. 3 years from now, let's say I'm in a happy relationship and everything's good. So they might say something that triggers me, and that memory comes a knocking. And this is why I call myself on a healing journey, because it's never done. And you may have that come knocking, and you'll say, come here, fucker, I know you. Come sit down. Why is this experience? What is it about? You know, this is what I'm going through now. Tell me from your past experience, recollection, you know, pulling the memory up. What's similar about this? What can I understand about this to be able to make it through this moment and just get one step further? Because that's what happens when you're in the tornado of being with a narcissist. You need to keep in mind, this is trying to do a long trek through an Atlantic, you know, mega snowstorm. You only have 2 feet in front of you to see. You don't know where you're headed. You just know you want the fuck out. So keep making, what's the next step forward? There it is. What's the next step forward? There it is. This is starting to feel good. What's the next step forward? Boop. Oh, I see a footprint from the past. I'm going the wrong way. And this is how it works. You need to have these analogies to understand it's not always going to be forward. You're going to fall back. Mm-hmm. But I hope that having tea analogy helps at least one of you to understand. You're going to have that skill. Do it with normal people. Do it with your narcissistic abuser. Do whatever. You might have a bad experience at work today and have to be like, man, I'm going to have to go sit and have tea with that you know, that whole situation. I need to digest it. So that's my long rant.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of people over here like clapping and stuff like that. It said, what did you say? Somebody said, I'm going to need a lot of tea.
You and me both.
Yeah, so I'm going to need tons of tea.
Keep in mind when you do that, like the best thing you can do is you can also develop what I would call, and I'm making this up right now, but I know that it's real for me. You can develop your own tea room. You know, let's say you've got a really supportive partner now, and part of your tea room is that you've got your partner there to talk it out, and they're just there to listen. And you tell your partner, you give them the knowledge. Don't expect them to mind read. That's bullshit. Tell them, look, I just need you to sit here, and I'm going to talk aloud. And all I want you to do, honestly, is just say, you know, wow, you know, and just have little tidbits of being validated, which is like, wow, dude, that is so, I can't imagine going through that. Wow. You went through that? What else happened? They can even play the role of saying, and this is if you have a really loving partner to do it with, this is a gift to you. You know, they can even ask you, well, how did you feel during that moment? What was that like? You know, why did that happen? Why do you think they did that? What's the best rationality your brain can come up with? Okay, well, you know, what if you find yourself in a situation like that in the future? What do you think you could do about that? And just tell them, like, look, you're first of all going to need to be very non-judgmental. You're going to have to be really gentle, and you can even give them a script. These are the only 6 things that you're allowed to say. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I can't imagine what that was like to go through. Mm-hmm. You know how profound for survivors that is, just to hear that? God, I'm so sorry for what you had been through with them. You absolutely did not deserve that. I really can't believe that somebody would actually do that. I'm so sorry for you. I'm so sad that that happened to you.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I'm dead serious.